Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming Riot durability update. As you can kind of see right here that I have right in front of us. So this video will be coming out once the embargo rolls off on it. But basically, for those who don't know, Riot has kind of been talking a little bit about, hey, we feel like damage is a bit too high in the game right now. We're trying to address that in ways that kind of help and solve and, alleviate this issue. So pretty much this is kind of going to be their almost mid-season. So this will be going live on patch 12.10, which is a couple weeks out actually when the video releases. So it won't be this next patch, but the patch afterwards. Basically what I'm going to be doing is covering all the things that they want to do. And giving my thoughts on it a lot, because I also got to participate in a call with them, and ask questions and see where their head's at for most of the stuff. So I'll be hopefully maybe answering a lot of the questions that maybe people have just over this video, and just jumping into it, and also just introducing you to the whole concept itself. So, as a common complaint of League of Legends in general right now is that League of Legends feels too fast-paced, and it feels like you die too frequently and too easily to pretty much anything and everything. So this is Riot's early response to this problem. So durability update is going to basically be an overall pretty much every character in the entire game, kind of like, think like Runes Reforged when the new runes came out and everyone kind of got armor and MR and compensation buffs for all the characters across the board, although this was more individualistic than a flat number. So what's going to happen is the base health of all characters are going to go up, and then the health that they gain per level is going to go up, their armor is going to go up, and their magic resist is going to go up. Basically, this is, as I want to really point out, a starter pack for changes to the game. This is not the finalization. They know and acknowledge that the game will be out of sorts, and there might be fringe cases of characters that do really well or do really poorly because of it. But as a concept, they're going to just basically be going, hey, you know what? Everyone's a bit tankier. So what I'm going to actually do is just let you visually see the numbers right here before we go into talking about, the state of the game and all that stuff. So as you can see right here, base health, every character, boom, 70 extra health. Their health growth is going to be 14 extra. Their armor growth is going to be 1.2, and their MR growth is going to be 0.8. So you can kind of see the total differential of a character is going to be about 300 health, 20 armor, and 13 armor and MR. Now, I will say that at level 18, this seems really great. I'm a big proponent of telling you to take conditioning and overgrowth pretty often, and I would say that for the most part those runes are significantly noticeable. And to kind of give like comparable numbers, they're like between 13 to 15 armor and MR, and overgrowth is like usually between the 100 to 150 mark. Obviously it varies depending on the length of the game and stuff like that, but if you just want like a numbers comparison, that's where we're pretty much at. So basically I would call this about the same stage. Now, one thing that I did bring up and tried to talk to them about was, and I tried to keep an eye out, is that obviously this is insane when you're level 18, right? But my concern probably lies in the fact that, per level means that, when you're in the lower levels, this isn't as impactful. And also for characters that are just naturally under-leveled, so like supports and AD carries, especially in the early stages of the game, will not benefit from this nearly as much. So those were things that I want to keep my eyes out for. Those are definitely big concerns that I have just in general. But I do like the flat at the start. I'm glad that there is at least a flat at the start, so it doesn't feel like, okay, all the power is jammed into the base health. So, for example, right, like most bottom lane characters, between 550 and 600 health, maybe you buy a Doran's Blade, maybe you buy a health item, etc. Maybe you start with the health rune or something. You're going to have about over 10% extra HP. It's basically just like always starting with an extra Doran's Blade of HP or a Doran's Ring. So you're going to probably notice this a decent amount in all-ins, but you won't notice this as frequently when you're just naturally trading. You'll just feel like, oh, I have to go through a little bit more HP most of the time. This is mostly going to tackle HP thresholds, so it's a lot harder to, potentially get all-in or maybe even die to jungle ganks. Now, before we talk about, my thoughts on it and where the directions are, really what we want to talk about is kind of like the goals of this, right? We want to know what Riot's trying to do, right? So the TLDR of this is players feel like their champions are dealing and taking less damage, right? They want to make sure that your characters are just tankier in general. I think this is not a bad approach. You know, a lot of people have also suggested literally just axing 25% of the damage of every character in the entire game. I personally feel like that would be a lot harder, just because, you know, naturally, certain abilities have certain, you know, coefficients and numbers and stuff like that, and I feel like that's an easy way to really mess up the game, whereas I do like the health approach. If someone were to ask me, hey, you know, what is the problem with League of Legends? Why is there so much damage? I usually reference the proportion of gold versus the proportion of EXP. So the way I see it is that when you level up, yeah, you get some damage on your abilities, but I really feel like the majority of your core power is that you get health, armor, and MR. So levels are, in a lot of ways, your tanky stats, and gold, in most cases, are your offensive stats. Yes, there's obviously differences, because, you know, if you're playing a tank, then it's just defensive stats, and it's more tankiness, but in most cases, it's usually, in this current stage of the game, increased damage. So because of that, we're making levels a lot more important, right? Like, we're making levels way more dependent, way more powerful, and just laning phase in general might be a lot harder for you to die in lane. Now, I say this very lightly. I don't really think that you will be noticing it as frequently if you are not a super high level player who plays on the edge of your character. I think for lower elo players, this will help for sure as levels add up, because you'll be like, whoa, I'm still alive, what the heck? Maybe in situations that you normally wouldn't, but usually your health bar will be blinking red, right? You know, you're getting probably about 150 to 200 life, give or take. Like level 11, for example, is like a good sweet spot. Okay, so you'll have about 200 health extra, like the level 11 sweet spot, which is usually when like a lot of the action happens. If you play a carry character, you'll probably get to 16 pretty frequently in games that just aren't blowouts, so I'm a big fan of that. Basically, on top of the fact that, you know, people want to feel like they're dealing and taking less damage, burst champions, right? We want them to commit more resources. I'm sure plenty of people have had Zeds literally just W to them and just auto attack them and kill them. So now this allows you to be a little bit tankier. You have more reaction time, and this gives you an opportunity to counterplay. Now, one other thing that they listed was skirmishes, team fights last longer. So we can start actually jumping into some of their mission statements and where I agree and disagree. I actually disagree with most of the mission statements of things like lasting longer, or, you know, potentially drawn out fights, or like slowing down the pace of the game. I don't think any of these things will happen. I think that if you have 200 extra HP and that's what keeps you alive, that's the difference maker, most of the time you'll be out of the fight anyway. So I don't actually foresee a lot of skirmishes and team fights lasting much longer unless you have sustain. This is where kind of the landscape of the game I feel like will change heavily, is that if it's really hard for you to be hit at those thresholds to get 100 O'd, then what will end up happening is sustain will reign supreme. Any character that has a way to get their HP spiked back up, or if you have a character that heals you a lot, this means that you can survive all ins and then return fire. There's counter pressure in that sense, which I like a lot, because there's a lot higher emphasis on making sure that your character that's designed to one shot actually one shots, and then there's skill on surviving and you know, playing a lot better. Now, the things that most people would be concerned about before we go into really my overarching themes and thoughts on a lot of things is all the rest of the stuff. So this is the surface level stuff that most people will think about, talk about, etc. But it's really important for us to understand all the other crap that's happening. So heals and shields gonna be reduced. All heals and shields effectively in the game reduced by 10%. You know, all shields reduced by 10%. This is probably why you saw a patch, maybe a patch or two ago, on things like Soraka and how she lost some lost some healing on her W and stuff like that. And then I really like this change, actually. By nerfing just flat percentage, this makes Grievous Wounds a less of an egregious element. But that basically means that you're kind of still playing at 60%, even though it says 50%. I think this is mostly a placebo thing. That's an attempt to, like, make you less concerned or interested in Grievous Wounds. Is they're just nerfing the off the top, so you're still basically healing at the same number reduction, but a little bit off the top that you're not seeing is kind of what's happening. Next, obviously, as I said before, sustain is going to be king. You know, being able to heal yourself back up and stuff like that. Looks like they're already ahead of the curve on these kinds of things, so you can kind of see all the healing is getting nerfed. I don't think that that's actually by any significant margin, though. That's the one thing that I really want to emphasize is that I feel like since everything is being marginally downgraded in power, I don't think that you'll actually notice differences in the game. Outside of just not getting blown up a lot. Like, I don't think when you buy Vampiric Scepter, you're like, whoa, I have so, you know, I have 1% less healing from this. You're not going to notice these kinds of things, for the most part, and you shouldn't really, because these aren't noticeable numbers, for the most part. So they are nerfing a bit of things just across the board. These are more preemptive things rather than tentative. I feel like these are like, oh, okay, well, you know, as I just said, you know, conclusively, hey, if, you know, no one does, then maybe sustain is just super OP. So they're already kind of taking some countermeasures to that. I'm not sure if actually it's going to be enough on a lot of character individuals. And we'll get into that after we kind of cover all the other stuff, just so you have all the info. Other nerfs, as you can see, they're trying to actually make tanks tankier. So you can see right here, okay, you know, they're nerfing a lot of the pen items, you know, nerfing all the pen items. So one thing that you need to understand about this too is that, remember, your character is getting increased armor and MR, all of them are, and now all of a sudden all the pen items are being nerfed too. Also, another thing to note too, previously before this patch, range characters don't get MR per level, but now all of a sudden they do. So that makes Spell Pen a weird power level, because beforehand you used to go, you know, hey, get my Sork Shoes, hey, maybe I get my Shadow Flame. Even if you don't have Illudens, like, you're pretty much close to, you know, you're over the 30 magic resist threshold for squishy targets. So now all of a sudden you actually have this new threshold to build towards. So that might make AP Mage one-shots a lot less frequent too, on top of the Armor Pen ones. So I do like the changes to Pen. I do like that, and kind of maybe something that they are thinking about or not thinking about is finally having every character have MR per level. Means that it might be a lot harder to kill ranged characters. Also, as you can kind of see, you know, preemptively nerfing some other things like Moonstone Renewer. I'm sure people who watch my stream or whatever are concerned maybe this is too heavy-handed on healing reduction. I don't think so. I think for the most part it'll be fine. I think the biggest problem of your healing power has always been not your numbers, but your character, you know, your teammate dying instantly before you can front load all your healing or consistently heal them. So I think that as long as they're just alive, you'll run into a lot of scenarios where you can just, out of combat healing is what I would just call it. Like, hey, they're not being hit. There's no, you know, healing reduction on them, etc. So you'll be in good shape in most cases. After that, you can see right here, they're also bumping some mana regen. So, like, Doran's Ring is going up a little bit in mana regen. The shard item is going up in mana regen. Doesn't really impact the lower ones or whatever like that. Okay, so there's a little bit more mana regen. Maybe they're concerned about, you know, people going conditioning percents being reduced a little bit, which is fine. You'll just get basically about the same natural percentages or same natural numbers. It's just now you'll also have an insane extra flat number that's coming in on it. And then other things that they were kind of tackling too. Kind of interesting, actually. I'm not completely sure how I feel about these, but we'll get into them, which is just basically Baron Nashor. You know, it's going to do a lot more damage, as you can see, 125, 8 per level to 150. So Baron is just going to do a lot more damage to you. Just in general, I think this is probably good. I think neutral objectives in general have felt way too easy to kill. Baron obviously has a lot higher of a risk than dragons, and I would have loved to actually see some dragon buffs to whatever dragon is the soul archetype. So you know how, like, there's the first dragon and the second dragon, those are two different dragons, but then it's just the next dragon forever, because that's the deciding soul. I think that dragon should have probably seen some huge stat buffs, but that's for another time. And then after that, they also, you know, hey, we bumped up health. We want to make sure that turrets do more damage. So as you can see, turrets do a lot more damage, but I don't think it really matters, to be completely honest. I think most of the time you only really care about this number right here, which is the outer ring turrets. You're usually not turret diving the second or third one, and usually when you are, it's a character with 4,000 health and 4 million armor, right? Obviously an exaggeration, but in most cases, I don't think you'll really see any, you won't even notice this in most games that you play, just because you won't usually turret dive. But this one's the most noticeable, which is going to be, hey, you know what? turrets are going to start doing a lot more damage. But that's only really if they're heating up. So if you're continuously tanking turret shots, it'll do a lot more damage. This is just to basically deter people from just, hey, 100-0, I'm going to run up the turret, kill you, blast you off. I think this is a good change. I really think that turret AI is really where the problem is, though. I think it's just always been way too easy to turret dive people. So that is my big issue with that. I'm not going to go too much into this because I want to talk about really durability and what it's going to look like for the landscape of the game, my concerns, my thoughts on it, etc. So now that I've kind of given you all the data, let's talk about what I think. I think this is a good step in the right direction. I definitely think characters will be noticeably tankier. I think that having characters tankier in the laning phase is also good. I think that people who have played all-in characters for a long period of time don't actually learn how to play the game in terms of actually whittling someone down or having an effective all-in that takes summoners and then doing it again, etc. I think that especially bottom lane has really been prone to this, where, a lot of the games are just Nautilus or Thresh or Blitzcrank or Pyke or Rel or Leona, and they just hit a spell on you, they all in you, you die almost every time. So I think that this is a great change of landscape. I think also this will make AD carries significantly tankier, because I think one of the biggest mistakes that squishy targets make is they don't go resolve secondary, and I feel like the discovery of power is going to be a huge thing. So I think people who play squishy characters but then discover, hey, I can take conditioning overgrowth and combine it with this, and all of a sudden, you're probably playing with 400, maybe 300 or 400 extra HP at level 11, level 12, which is kind of the sweet spot I always want to focus on, because a level 18 is kind of a fantasy. Most games don't go to that. Usually, you're playing to 20, 25 minutes, maybe even 30. So like between 11 and like 13 or 14 is kind of that sweet spot. So having that extra, tons, we'll just call it, about 15 or 16 armor and MR. You're going to have, about 150, 200 extra health, etc. It will make you a lot tankier. And I think once carries figure out that the secret to success is just making sure you don't die, because AD carries especially do so much damage, I'm venturing to say that we're probably going to move back to a more standardized meta. But I think it will take a long time. That's the thing. In solo queue, I think people will still pick what they want, especially in lower elo. I think people will not notice the changes right away. They will, not conceptualize it, and a lot of that is just tied to the fact that I've already said, the lower elo you are, the less likely you are to play on the edge, the nice edge of a character's true potential, and so most people will not notice this. But I think at a higher level, and especially if people figure out that you can run conditioning overgrowth on every character with these changes, those characters will be exceptionally hard. I think it will be really hard to kill things like Vayne, for example, with a shield bow and a Lulu on him, or maybe a Kog'Maw. In this sense, a lot of what you can think about is akin to the meta we had. I don't remember how long ago, but like a lot of shield bow characters. A shield bow character and like a Lulu or a Soraka or something like that, keeping them alive will make them very, very potent. That being said, I think that also another really important thing is that I don't think this will actually help tanks. I know a lot of people probably think, oh yeah, we'll probably go back to a lot of standardized gameplay, maybe more tanks, etc. I think tanks will only be good in games where the enemy team has made a drastic error in not having enough damage archetype. And what I mean by that is obviously the physical versus magic. I think that these kinds of changes will clearly have a pronounced effect on, like, hey, you know what? One team, they picked 4 physical damage characters, and their magic damage dealer doesn't do that much damage. Maybe it's like a Karma or something, right? Or like a LeBlanc or something of that course. Okay, well then the enemy team picks Malphite. All right, you're gonna have a bad time, and that's gonna be the case. But I think that's good, because I think as this kind of settles in, maybe we have fringe cases of characters that are kind of broken or not. I think that people will move more towards standardized things in terms of damage. And we were having this discussion in the call, and I kind of agreed with it, which is kind of like how supports should be looked at, where, okay, is a consequence of making supports have more gold also increasing the damage, which I agreed with. Hey, if you're playing support and you want to carry, you can play Zyra now, you can play Lux, you can play Senna. And because of that, not only are you adding damage to the pool of characters that are dealing damage, but it also means that you're not reducing damage. You're not playing a shielding character or a tank character. This is the same philosophy I would apply to a lot of the roles. Right now, junglers are kind of freeform for whatever they want to play. Top laners play maybe bruisers. And I think that if this encourages more tank play, then you'll see damage go down a lot just because, hey, people are picking less characters that just do a lot of damage. So you have to be less worried about more things. And when there's less characters that do a lot of damage, guess what? You have an easier time protecting your characters because of that. If there's only a Vayne, or if you have a Vayne Lulu on your team and there's only a LeBlanc on the enemy team and there's 2 tanks and an AD carry, right? Okay, well then all I have to worry about is the LeBlanc blowing him up. And as long as I keep him alive through that, we'll be in good shape. So I think this will be a decent nudge in the way and direction of more standardized play. I also just think ranged support characters will probably be a bit better. And I think AD carries will stay the same, because I don't think, the way I think about it is like, if an AD carry is walking up and getting blasted and like, let's say he lives through these runes, unless he has a shielding or healing support, he'll have 200 health, let's just call it that, right? Like he'll have like 150, 200 health threshold that he normally is not supposed to survive with, and then he can't really return that much damage because he'll just get killed instantly, right? We're not reducing anyone else's damage, and some characters do kind of absurd damage with their abilities, okay? Just to be honest. So outside of that, I'm actually pretty happy with it. I have really big concerns though about drain tanks. Aatrox, Riven, basically anything that runs Gore Drinker, Death Stance. I just look at these changes and go like, I don't even see Death Stance in here. One argument that I heard is like, oh, well, it'll be harder for them to get the resets, so Death Stance will be worse because of that. I'm not really buying it. Just Gore Drinker itself has been a pretty unpleasant item for a really long time, even though you can one-shot a lot of these characters. And I feel like with the tanky stats that everyone's going to be getting, and the fact that I feel like if by the end of 6 months everyone isn't taking some form of resolve secondary with conditioning overgrowth, I think you're just doing yourself a disservice in most cases, just because it just takes away the entire kill threshold of you ever being blown up in one shot. And the thing is the way I see the game is whenever there's a high volume of damage, you don't usually need to build damage because they're building damage, right? So like the concept of like, I'm sure people have seen Talons with Gore Drinkers, right? It goes like, why would you go Gore Drinker? You're an assassin. Well, he already one-shots you, so he's going to take away his only disadvantage, which is, hey, since he one-shots you already, he's going to take away the disadvantage that also he's squishy. And I feel like that's how you should always approach in high damage scenarios is you don't actually build more damage, you don't lean into that, you actually build tankier because you already one-shot people, you just need to not be one-shot in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. So I think that when people start doing those runes, I think that menaces like Riven and, all these Gore Drinkers, Aatrox, Olaf, I'm surprised, hasn't really seen any surface power, even though, they're going to do the rework for them in Swain. So I'm really concerned about just a bunch of drain tanks. Really. That's my biggest issue right now, my biggest concern. But if we don't see too many drain tanks, I think that's fine. I don't think it's a problem if there's a Riven playing and then he's got really strong and does well. But I am concerned about, hey, you know what? They didn't really push tank items. Like, right, we saw Pen go down a lot. But my complaint is that most characters nowadays deal true damage. It's just kind of how it is. So I'm not even sure how tanks will actually fare in this scenario. I think they might be okay. Or maybe even necessary if tank supports get worn out, not used anymore, just because having engaged tools will be important. But overall, I think that solo queue is really random in a lot of ways, so we'll probably see a mixture of a ton of different things. I'm mostly excited for the bot lane changes, just because this is the place where 2 people are affected in a lot of ways, and the landscape of bot lane can change a lot because of that. So I'm pretty excited in that regard. But I am terrified that if there isn't, enough pressure on the drain tank characters, we might run into a bunch of issues like that. But yeah, that pretty much concludes it. I think overall it's a good stepping stone. I don't want to be negative in this sense because I actually do think that it is a good idea, a good way to approach things. It's not too complicated. You should expect, by the way, on this patch for characters to be dumb. There's probably going to be some characters that just don't work anymore, and there's probably going to be some characters that probably work a little bit too well. I'm going to probably say things like Vayne Lulu is, you know, kind of what I'm keeping my eye out for. And maybe even some Soraka coming out pretty soon. So those are the kinds of things that I want you to kind of look for. I'll end up releasing a tier list when we get closer to the patch, because I love playing enchanters. I've always just been a fan of range supports, as everyone knows in my chat. So I think those will be exceptionally strong. I think this will also create a more mandatory requirement to have some kind of AP threat on your team, which I feel like currently in the game state is not really there. So I think that is a really important thing. I think there's just been a heinous amount of just full AD comps that are honestly like bogus in a lot of ways, just because of how powerful drain taking and one-shotting people is. So I'm hoping that we move more towards at least like a balance, even if it's not always an AP mage in mid. Just kind of having magic damage back in the game, but not too much, obviously, is going to be really good. Really excited for this patch. I'm hopeful in the future. This is probably one of the best times to have it happen, because it's right after MSI, so there's going to be no pro play. And it's our time. Lulu's rise up, you know what I'm saying? I'm just messing with you. But, alright. Thank you so much, guys. You know, leave your comments in the section below. Tell me what you think of this patch, right? There's a lot of different changes, a lot of different things going on. Are you excited about it? Are you frustrated about it? Are you concerned about it? Hopefully optimistic. You know, maybe damage. You love the damage. You one-shot people and you love playing Zed every game, right? Or maybe you're a Soraka and you're frustrated that your teammate dies before you can even heal them. Let me know in the comment section below. Really appreciate it. Don't forget that bell and whistle and subscribe to the channel, guys. I'll see you next time. Peace.